Yeah, I think we'll make a start now, guys, if that's alright. We were expecting until about 10 more people, but they probably might trickle in later. Or I know there's been quite a few different lectures going on throughout the university this week as well, so probably might be tired of lectures. But, you know, welcome to YPF lecture series. So we're doing one on in terms of economic and political austerity. So it's essentially how do we ensure good architecture is being provided to the community when, you know, purse strings are probably at their tightest than they've ever been, and how do we reinvigorate communities in that way. So we've got two speakers. So the first is Paul Reed from GT3. So Paul's talking about Morpeth Leisure Centre, which is I'll let Paul talk about it a lot more because he knows it way more than I do. But Paul's kindly agreed to give us a little talk on that and the development of that project and how it's working in use. And we've also got Stephen Lane from Leonard Design Architects, who's come up from Nottingham to have a chat about it. About a scheme he was involved, separate from his practice, but as talking about community engagement and basically doing a new master plan proposals for the city centre of Nottingham. Look at the Broadmarsh shopping centre and how that's been reinvigorated into a public space. So some quite interesting ideas there. So I think I'll just let Paul introduce you, if that's all right. I don't know if we've got a clicker. I think we do. Unless you might just want to use the mouse, actually. Yeah. That's okay, yeah. But yeah, I'll let you take it away.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. So yes, got Stephen Lane. There you go. Thank you.
Excellent. Good evening. Thanks for everybody making that, particularly on a horrible night like tonight. Pretty chilly out there. I'm Paul Reed. I'm Sport Leisure Director at GT3 Architects. I've got a few slides about the business just to give you some thoughts about an idea of who we are. We use the mantra people architecture, and I thought that was quite key to the discussion tonight in terms of communities, which are central to everything that we do. We don't just talk about people architecture, we actually do it on a day-to-day basis. We ensure that our buildings deliver for the people and the communities that we design for. Key to that is a rigorous engagement process, making sure that the brief's right at the beginning, and we're constantly speaking to the actual communities. We're not just speaking to the client who says, I'd like a leisure centre, we go in and design it. It's not a case for that. We want to speak to the local people, we want to speak to all of the stakeholders involved and make sure all of their thoughts are distilled into the design, which for us is a key piece of the design. And that's the idea in terms of commitment to deliver projects with real long-lasting, value for the communities they're designed for. And that was key to Morpeth, and gladly, hopefully you'll see by the end of this presentation, it really has worked in Morpeth, which is really lovely to see. This is a practice. We place people at the heart of our projects. We've got around 500 million over the last 5 years in terms of sports and community leisure. And this is why we do it, and I'll come to that again at the end. It's the people that use our facilities are the lifeblood of those things. Our people as well, just to give you an idea, because I felt it was young and it was good for this forum in terms of young architects, is that we've got a 50-50 gender split, even at leadership level as well, which is wonderful to see and great to be involved in. It's not always the case in architecture, it's few and far between actually, but that's how we are. And we've also got an opportunity for people within the business to join our People Academy. So anybody at the base can actually be involved in some of the groups that help shape our strategy as a business, which is how we try to run our business itself. So onto the case study, which is Morpeth Leisure Centre. This is a presentation that I've kind of morphed around kind of the opportunity to utilise sport and leisure in the changing UK high street. Obviously, everybody's pretty much aware that the UK high street's on its knees. Opportunities for shops, etc., to be invigorated would be a fantastic thing. We were given this site, so I'm not going to pretend that we actually put this facility where it was, but we utilised the opportunity given to us, which is this is at the end of the high street in Morpeth, to try and revitalise the local economy and local area. That's the view of the. This is all brownfield scrubland on the riverside, so it's now a parkland setting for the local people of Morpeth. In fact, one interesting thing I noticed about Morpeth when we went up, there's a river running through Morpeth, and other than the bridge going across the river, you probably wouldn't know it's there. Not a single building in Morpeth actually looks towards the river or utilises that, and that's changed now, so we've got a building that does that. It's not a great river, by the way. It's not the Tyne, but it is a river nonetheless. Just to give you some context about how we think about buildings as well and how Morpeth was thought about. 3 strands of sustainability, essentially. Economic, obviously well-defined, brief, strong engagement, etc. Environmental, meaning green, doing all of that. But key to us is this piece, social sustainability. Understanding the barriers to participation in sports. It is key, particularly in terms of sport and leisure, because a lot of people feel that they can't attend these places. They think that everybody in the gym is going to be wearing lycra and they're all 30 years old and lifting lots of weights. That's not the case, and it's actually definitely not the case with Morpeth now, which is great to see. Inclusive design, so again, making sure these facilities are welcoming to everybody. It's difficult to do that, because if you try and do that, sometimes the building becomes everything for nobody. You need to think about a facility making sure that you're actually making everybody welcome rather than nobody welcome. And that's the welcoming buildings kind of piece, which say we've really engaged with the community to try and do that. So that's the kind of, my mantra is Little Point designing the most environmentally sustainable building in the world if nobody wants to be there. So you can do all of the BREEAM, we're delivering passive house leisure centres, you can do all of that. They're not going to use any energy because they're designed like that, but if people don't want to be there and they're not uplifting spaces to be in, then to me they're not hitting the brief. We need these spaces to be sustainable in terms of the use of these buildings in particular. And community engagement is key to that. So these are all our facilities, by the way. We haven't taken any of these offline. So Morpeth was a really interesting brief. Early engagement with the client was that they wanted a co-located facility. The site that we're on, that we've got the new facility on, was the library. It was flooded in around 2000. It was a pretty cataclysmic flood in Morpeth that they've now got flood defences around. That was a 70s building, single-storey timber block. The library went into various buildings around the town centre, and it was hardly anybody using any of it. So they were just sat there with a lot of books in. The largest poetry collection outside of London is in the new centre, but it just sat there. People weren't using it. They wanted community services, so basically you can go down there and speak to people about your bins, pay your rent as a local authority sort of rental side of it. Adult learning was key. Actually getting people into the facility to learn skills, cooking for basic cooking skills, going in to learn various academic skills also, and upskilling the local population was part of the brief. So the customer services, and then sports and leisure. Sports and leisure piece was just, that's just a leisure centre. We're trying to get all of these things in one facility to work, and all of those different people to be in one building. Again, sports and leisure leisure facilities are hard enough to get people into when they're going to go and do sports. The lycra clad thing I talked about earlier on, actually getting somebody to go in and get a book, go and use adult services, that's where we started to think the challenge is there that we need to rise to. And there have been a number of these that haven't worked, so we knew we had our work cut out, to be honest. Context was, essentially a facility that would open its doors to a wide range of users, most importantly for the health and well-being outcomes of the generations now and future. We had a whole raft of requirements in terms of the brief, but it was breaking down the barriers to participation. We wanted to sit well in terms of the conservation area, which was adjacent, and the riverside setting, and fostered synergy between the community and making sure that we can get all of those things into one facility. And again, all of the facility types trying to be in one location. And the health and well-being, to me, isn't just about the sports and leisure aspect. It's about making sure people could be in this facility. It's a designated warm space now, so people can go in there, get a free cup of tea. The library, if you go into the library, the librarians come around and ask you if you'd like a cup of tea, and if you would, they give you a token, so you don't have to go and ask for a free cup of tea. Little things like that mean that people have got their own dignity and opportunity within the facility as well. So they've really thought about it, and the local authority have taken to a facility like this really well. But key to all of that, and how we unlocked it in terms of a design, was the engagement with the local people. We offer a consultancy service as a business that is outside of our design. So we, for instance, wrote the brief for the Durham County Council HQ. we didn't design the building, we just wrote the brief for the client. So we get involved in that early stage piece of work. We wrote the brief for the Chase facility that's going to be built on this site. We can do that because we've got a skill in going to speak to the right people. And what, say with Durham County Council, we spoke to the cleaners up to the chief exec, not the other way around, because you need to make sure that the building works and it works for everybody. So we understand that the stakeholder engagement is key to these things. So at the beginning, we said, right, who are your stakeholders to the client? Who do we need to speak to? Because we're not going to just speak to you, we're going to speak to. So we went to library services, went to community groups, went to the young people who weren't involved in the discussions. We had face-to-face, we had online surveys for people that couldn't make any of the events. And that's all outside of planning consultation. That isn't the 4 weeks before planning goes in, having a brief chat with people and going, this is your design, what do you think? And we'll change a few things. That isn't consultation. That is giving a design to people and telling them what's going to be built. What you need to do is all of that time frame up to that point, or stage 1, RIBA 1, you need to be speaking to the right people so you can put the brief together in the right way. And understanding this, which is a real big thing that a lot of architects don't seem to understand, is we don't have all the best ideas. And if you can think like that, in my view, and all of you in here might be like that anyway, but that's what we need to think about, is that if you can take on some of the ideas of other people within the facility that will use the facility well, it's only going to be for the benefit of the design and moving forward. So I'll come on to some of these pieces as we move through, because I've kind of put them onto some slightly more interesting slides with design. But it was all about the kind of engagement with people. The key themes that came from that key engagement was connection to the high street, needed to be connected to the wider area. A facility for all, which again present its own challenges, and to complement the high street. We didn't want to put a cafe in the leisure centre that then took away from the local businesses. We want certain people to use the cafe. Usually, for instance, it'll end up more likely than being the parents with a soft play, but that's fine because there's no other soft plays in the town centre. So we're not taking away from that area, we're adding to it. And a bit of feedback, which, to be honest, this is the sort of stuff that makes you feel good about yourself on a day-to-day basis. From a client point of view, they were really keen, and a lot of this has gone into, it's doing really well on the awards side of it, and this is what we're pushing. We're not pushing its beautiful piece of architecture, we're pushing the fact that it's really making waves in the local community. This one, you don't have to read all of it, but essentially the lady went off her own bat. We didn't ask for any feedback. She had a daughter, 18 years old, who's got severe cerebral palsy, and where we put the changing places meant that she could utilise that without having to ask help from 3 or 4 people to get her daughter into the pool. So just freed a mother and daughter up to have a swim a lot easier than normal. And that, she just off her own back, came back and said, thanks so much, And that's the feedback that, when you get that, it makes you feel warm about your job, essentially. It makes you feel as if you've made a difference, even to one person, or 2 in that instance. Outside of all of that, we had to design a building. So the challenges of the site were quite interesting. It's in a floodplain. A lot of leisure centres are, because it's one of the few typologies of building you can build in a floodplain in the UK on planning law. We had to look at the 1 in 100 year flood. The building's 1.1 metres above ground level around, so the area around can flood. We also had to think about the fact that if that's the case, where's all that displaced flood water going to go? So we had to do a lot of flood modelling to make sure that it wasn't going to flood other houses, etc., around the area. Successful co-location of the library. What we did with that, we visited a whole bunch of other places, locally, nationally. A lot of libraries are adjacent to the cafe spaces. A lot of cafes have got soft plays in. Children in soft plays, people reading a book or trying to have some quiet time and doing some work. But libraries are more modern these days, but they still require a certain level of volume control. So we put the library at the far end of the building. But it means you can go to the cafe on the way in, this end, grab a coffee, go to the library, or just walk through the public street. Everything on this side of the building is public. There's no paywall, there's no barrier as you walk in the front of the building. Straight into a big public open area with lots of settees, seats, warm spaces that you can go and sit and get a book in here, come out into the parking setting as well. So that was key to that, breaking down the barriers, actually physically breaking down the barriers. allowing a public space where people can be and be trusted to use the building well, rather than saying, no, you have to be a member of the gym to come into this facility. Tight site with protected trees. Red Beach in a location here, which actually, if you look at it, and the reason why I did that big red circle is it made the form of the building. We actually started to look at the building and how it would be and put the Red Beach in, and the roots actually pushed further north than we expected. So we had to design the building around it. But the curve of the building, which is a nice space to be, but it's also formed from not touching the roots of that Red Beach. Which nearly didn't make it through Stow Marwyn, which would have been a real problem in terms of the building design, but it did make it through, which is good. Again, we did remote engagement and planning, so a lot of the building was finally built during COVID, that old thing that we had to deal with a little while back. So a lot of the experience on some of the engagement that we did was online. We did the first YouTube, which was hilarious if I'm honest, YouTube planning application for Northumberland, because nobody could use YouTube at the time either. It's quite a funny thing. So we did our online, and permission was granted via that, which I found out about 5 minutes later because it wasn't working particularly well, but it was the first one that was done. COVID-19 supply issues. We had Will Dixon build the building, and we had to think about how we could get some of the supply chain involved early. So our design was needing to be done earlier than it usually would to get that stuff on site or into a warehouse so you could buy it quick, get the prices put in as soon as possible, essentially. That's the sort of thing we were having to deal with back then. And it's a large-scale building in a sensitive conservation setting, so we had to do a lot of views from various different locations and areas. So we try to break down the facade and reduce the overall volume. Sports buildings, it's a forecourt sports hall, a big 25-metre pool, with residential behind it. We needed to break that down, otherwise people would just feel the sheer mass of the building would be too much. But we had a client who was really interested in doing that, so we've got a green wall solution, and we've started to put a rhythmic facade. And we took the rhythmic facade from the local burgage plot and plan of Morpeth. So we looked at the history of Morpeth and the fact it's all burgage plots. So we started to break the sort of overall mass of the building down. And it nestles quite well in the overall site itself. So the strategic moves of the building come on in the design, break down the mass of the building, which we managed to do. Stepping stone facilities, so trying to utilise the facility as part of the high street and not having everything at the front entrance. And also connectivity to the views, both in and out, because it's in a fantastic setting. And this is the burgage plot piece. So you can start to see the kind of figure ground, which we're all forced to do at university for good reason, to be honest, because it works really well. And obviously we haven't got our building on there, but that's how we informed the rhythm of the facades. Location, as I said earlier on, we were given the location. My personal thoughts are that as designers we should be involved a lot earlier to look at locations, particularly with sustainability involved. But this one is in the town centre, so it's fantastic for sustainable travel. There's only 60 parking spaces. That's it. That's all the parking for the facility. We usually get forced, and this wasn't Sport England, to allow 200, which ends up just a sea of car parking or a building on stilts. The local authority were really progressive. There was a new car park going in across the river, and they said, look, we've got enough car parking in the local area to get people to the town centre. We don't need to add more on this site. So minimise it, allow people who need it. I think most of these ones are mother and baby and accessible parking bays now. These ones. So it's minimal parking, which it still works really well. Whenever I go to the centre, I can usually get parked in that area, to be honest, because everybody else parks in the rest of the car parks around. External design response, connection to the town. That's the view from the fitness suite, which it's a wonderful spot. And the best thing is it's not covered with running machines. For me, usually you just see a sea of running machines, and actually they've put the functional fitness at that end, so it really enlivens the building at that end of the site. The entrance to the main facility, the key to that one is designing an entrance that didn't look like a leisure centre. Again, trying to break down the barriers to participation. It doesn't look or feel like a leisure centre, and that's the feedback we get. Because you're going into a wide open public space with a cafe area, and the sports are tucked away. So it's a more of an open environment for people to get involved in. Connections to the garden. We actually designed this vale. One of the guys on our team went across the river, took a whole bunch of photographs and digitised it into the vale. And where the trees were, we minimised the vale, where we maximised the light through the vale. So where the trees would actually give us the shade, and the opposite where there was less trees. So we utilised the vale in the right way, all based on 50% opacity. And this is the minimising the mass kind of idea from the main roadside. And funny enough, I've got a friend who lives opposite in the residential, and I didn't know that from primary school, and she loves it, which is nice to hear as well. So, little anecdotal bits. Internal design response, fully public street, as I've mentioned. Key views between spaces. So when you do come into the community cafe in this area, it's just a large cafe space for 100 seats, where you can see into the pool. Some of the ideas behind that is you can see into all the key spaces, so that maybe next time you might think about, I might go for a swim, because you might see somebody like you in the pool. If you're an elderly person or something like that, you could actually look around and see these. Same views, we've got views off the main street into the major studio space as well, and into the library areas as well. So it's all about connecting spaces and making people think that maybe next time I'll be active. Maybe not, it's fine. Library space, which is connected to the outside areas too. We get a lot of people who also work from home in the library, so that idea of going to your local library, sitting in there, the upstairs space. Downstairs is the lending library, upstairs is the working library, and there's a lot of desks with lights on and sockets for your laptops. A lot of people work from there. Customer service is right at the main entrance, so people can go in, do what they need to do, and get out of the building nice and quick. And also the sports facilities, we see what you tucked around the back. Because people who generally go to the sports facilities are going there, and they know what they're doing, they know where they want to be. Flexibility of design was key. So again, we try to maximise some of the spaces. This is the large studio I was just talking about on the first floor. But that, in terms of fire regulations and size, has been designed that it could take a community, bring in bike sale, as well as people doing, yoga or boxercise or anything like that. So it's been designed as flexible spaces. The sports hall's also been designed to do the same. So the sports hall can have 150 people in rather than 16 playing badminton. That's just adding a couple of extra fire escapes, just to make sure you're making maximum flexibility of the area. Library is a workspace, again, up on the top floor. And adult learning, whenever I go back to the facility, we can never get into the adult learning space because it's always used. And the safeguarding issues, which is actually quite nice because it means it's just being really well used as a facility type. That's just a whole bunch of images I put together as part of the overall scheme itself. Evaluation, which is kind of the key piece around how successful it's been and maximising the use of these facilities for communities. The membership, the previous leisure centre was at the other end of the high street, so we've got a really good opportunity to kind of understand how these, whenever you build a new leisure centre, you're always going to get new members. But there was less than 1,000 people, members at the old facility, and the new membership's 4,000, and that's in just over a year. And that's in a town of 14,000 people. So we really are getting a lot of reach into the town centre itself and the people of the area. And it's a number of demographics. When you go in, you can see a huge area of demographics in terms of age, using the facilities, which is excellent. The library's become a key working space for the local area. We've just had membership increases across the board. That's some of the numbers, generally up nearly 200% on everything. Swim visits, gym visits, direct debit members, safe designated warm space. So it's become a really fantastic community space for the people of Morpeth. And then the social impact in terms of the library. There's more people going in and taking more books out, which again is fantastic. 165% increase in new members, an 18% increase on the re-registers as well. And a really lovely bit was that Barclays Bank are now using this as a drop-in centre. So they closed on the high street, but they're actually now using the leisure centre, the community services areas, 2 days a week. And one of the days I was in there, there was a queue out the door for people to use that. Which is a real shame that these things are happening, but if leisure centres can start to fill the gap, community facilities can start to fill the gap, that'd be a great chance. And then that's why we do it. essentially, to make sure we can put happy faces on all these people moving ahead. So I think, any questions? I don't know if I'd say them now or whether we do it at the end or.
We could do it at the end if you want.
Yeah.
I was going to say, do you want to do it now?
I'm
Once
down.
it's fresh.
I'm burning the fresh.
Go on.
Has anyone got any urgent ones? Because I'll chip straight in. I think it's a really nice project, but conservation and community, I know it's not a listed building, but conservation area. Do you have any challenges with the kind of which precedes which? So in this instance, so I work in conservation, but we tend to work in settings where historic comes first, the priority of the building. Whereas here, this is clearly the community came first.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any? I know you created designs with the way you kind of separated it all, so one huge scale. But did it ever conflict at any point? Or?
We were on the edge of a conservation area, so we weren't constrained fully by it. However, the planners, this was one of the most challenging planning. Shall I go back there? Can I go back one rather than leave it on that? It was probably one of the most challenging planning discussions or pre-apps we've had in terms of it. Conservation-wise, I mean, it's interesting, personally for me in Morpeth, some of the interesting discussions I had from a planning point of view was, but you let the Morrisons be built down the road? Question mark. And that doesn't mean we can get away with anything. I was just kind of pointing out the context of these things. With this, the size and scale of the building and the requirement on the site was key. For stages 1 and 2, in my mind, I was wondering whether the project would actually go ahead, because we had to say, look, this is a 6,500 square metre building on a very tight site next to a conservation area. So we had really strong pre-op discussions early doors to say, look, are you happy? We were taking views, we were building models, as you can imagine. We built physical models as well as computer models to kind of make people understand how it was going to sit. Bringing down the mass of the facility in terms of, and the views to and from the town centre were key. But there was no kind of key view cones that we were to the detriment of. And the planners at the end came to us and they were like, yeah, it actually settles really well within the area for the size of building. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it was probably a community first in terms of all of the mass of the facility, minimising the mass because we have made flexible spaces. The local netball team wanted an A-code sports hall, twice the size. We were just like, I'm really sorry, but that isn't going to be possible, because otherwise we'd have to stack the building, and we're not in central London. We're in a quiet town in Northumberland, which has got no height to it at all. So I think it was about the facility size in the first instance, and then taking the views of the conservation area in terms of that sort of facade-ism in some ways, if that answers your question.
Yeah, the aerial shot was really interesting, because I think that's where you could see that the footprint is sizable, which it has to be, because you've got to fit
that
what you
one.
need to fit. But then you have that, exactly what you said about splitting it up, it just...
And even
just
shows Morrison's in the
blend.
background there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're just trying to sort of not take over, but in theory it's a huge building.
It is. I mean, what we did in particular, I think, worked quite well is that from ground, you'd never know that that's the adult learning piece at the top. Essentially, they needed their own area for safeguarding anyway, so we put them right on the top, but we pulled the facade right in. So from ground, you've got no clue it's there. But when you actually get up there, the views from all areas are fantastic. There's actually a terrace that the client asked us to put in virtually at the last minute, pretty much when we were building the facility for use. And we've rented that meeting room for use before because it's such a good space to be in. But it was about breaking down the mass, which we don't always do on these facilities. Sometimes you celebrate the fact they're a big facility and make them a bit shiny and shouty. But this one, Berwick was the sister project to this. Berwick isn't quiet. It's got a probably 100-metre long facade of metal shingle panels that shimmer in the daylight, but that wouldn't have sat here. We needed to dull it down and bring down the mass of the building. So
it's nice that you got it in when you did, because I imagine that would be a biodiversity nightmare.
Probably. It was. I mean, it was it would have been mosaic site due to the situation. But yeah, I think you're right. We did. I mean, there was huge biodiversity discussions around it, the parkland setting, etc. It's all been done in local planning, etc. With the guys who do. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it probably would have been a challenge. But then, to be fair, that site would have just sat.
Which no, it's good that you got it in, especially because of all the benefit of that.
So.
Sorry, I've hijacked all the questions.
Yeah.
I've got like lots of questions, but I'll keep down to two. So the reason why I'm asking this question is because I'm an architect and I'm also a PhD student here in Northumbria, and I'm doing a PhD on adaptive reuse of former heritage prisons and community involvement.
Right.
So I've got lots in my mind right now.
Yep.
I would love to ask lots of things, but let's keep it simple. When you receive the brief from the client, which is the council, do you by any chance know if the council did an engagement prior to basically build the brief for you as a professional? So do you know if the council did an engagement to build that brief?
The council came to us with a business plan. So the facility now is run by Places Leisure, which is a national operator. When it was first put together, the brief was put together by a company called Active Northumberland. In particular, a chap called Mark Tweedy, who is fantastic, to be honest. He sort of has invented or pushed the pivot towards health and well-being and local authority leisure, which is really good. So I'd recommend picking up on his name, to be honest. He came to us because he realised that the current facilities just wasn't offering the correct type of service for the local area, and it could do so much more. So what he did was he wrote a business plan on the facility type and size. Leisure centres there is a base requirement for most leisure centres in terms of a forecourt sports hall, 25-metre pool, to allow for the local facilities of an area. And there's a national facilities plan. So he took that, a business case, put the two together and said, that's the brief. So they didn't consult with the local people, but then what they did was they gave us the brief and the business case and said, right, can you guys go and ask the right questions to see if this hits the target for the local area?
Okay, then these kind of bring us to the other question. It's kind of two questions, but kind of connected. I know that the council usually try to push for the engagement, but the engagement itself, it's a matter of time and it's money, and it's a huge effort. So not kind of all the professional might be willing at this stage, at this moment in time, to do it.
Yeah.
So first question is the council supporting the practice in any way? Which I don't know. Are they supporting, like, I don't know, giving extra time, giving extra funding?
Yeah, they were, to be honest.
Okay.
So essentially, as I say, this was a sister project to Berwick. I think the Berwick project was slightly more simple to put in a box in terms of a lot of what the facilities needed. It was local. They needed some tourist destination, piece of leisure water, etc. With this one, we'd already got to know the team as well at the council, so that helps doing back-to-back projects. So they understood us and trusted us. Again, through Mark saying we need to test this and make sure that the local people want these facilities and would be willing to come to a library in a leisure centre. So that's the sort of thing that we discussed with them. They did. They gave us more time, more money, question mark. More time. I mean, for us, I've got another slide where we do, you've probably all seen the one with the different swing types of what the QS wants, what the client wants, or this one. So the brief is really important on any facility type. If you can get the brief right, and it sounds like it should be, every project should be like this, but if you can get the brief right on a project at the off, and you can get the client to sign up to that and all the stakeholders to sign up to that, the linear nature of the project moving forward is easier. So we, as a business, are willing to commit some time and energy and money in the early part to then have less headaches down the line. And this was one of the most linear projects we've done. When we're down that's that's the brief. That's RIBA 2, spatial, straight into RIBA 4, carry on, get it built, done, and it looks exactly like we designed it because we put the time and effort in at the beginning.
And it was the community has been involved and
yeah.
they feel part of it.
Exactly.
So
there's a groundswell of positivity towards it. Yeah, exactly. So when you go to planning, they're not going, because they know they're not going to get a huge amount of parking because we've shown them. And we've shown them early enough that it isn't just a planning. So yeah, it's about that. I think we need to do more of getting that money up front, if I'm honest, to do this work.
Yeah.
But we're willing to put that time and effort in, and you can streamline it. So we do consultancy, so we know what's needed and how to streamline those as quickly as possible. But we do offer this service as a separate service, and it's not an insignificant amount of money. It's equal to RIBA 1 generally, but also in addition to. So, yeah, no problem.
What was wrong with the old site for the previous legislation?
Lots.
That is a site which looks over probably the best space.
Yeah. I mean, it's on the flood. It's actually on the floodplain. It's not defended in any way, which is why they haven't done anything with it since. To be honest, they'd like to. This one was because it lain empty for so long. They defended it. All of the flood defences have been put in down here, and it was slightly out of the floodplain, so it wasn't quite as bad. But also the old leisure scheme. Whenever we get these. In terms of sustainability, I'd love to refurb more centres, but because pool environments are so aggressive, what you end up doing is you start looking at the steelwork and essentially it's done. And the costs involved to refurb a centre are sometimes up to 80% of a new build. And you think, well, if we can do a new build with the new energy requirements and, passive house or low carbon, low energy principles, it makes sense. So, I mean, we designed these 50 years. The last one was 45 years old. So it was at the end of its life. It might look all right in terms of its location, but yeah, it was pretty shot internally. The pool tank was shot as well. Tiles were coming off, and yeah, 33 in its first tank, which is sorry.
Is this passive house?
No, this one isn't. We did a fabric first approach on this one. So we looked at improving against building regulations. It was designed 3.5 years ago. So it was a fabric first approach. Minimising any energy use within. It's got solar PV with battery storage on the site because they are very high energy buildings. We've minimised the hot and humid spaces next to the cold spaces, so you try and separate those so they're not fighting against each other constantly. But some of the constraints on this site made it quite challenging, to be honest. But even in 3 years, our thinking's jumped ahead. I probably wouldn't have designed it exactly like this now, but again, it moves so quickly. That's the way it is. So,
is there potential for any top-up spaces for them key, like sports hall and swimming areas or not?
We do that. Not in this instance. Again, comes down to cost in many ways and maintenance of those areas. Berwick, for instance, has got roof lights on that one, and it does get a good daylight into those spaces. But the budget was relatively tight on this one. It does start to cost in those areas. So I like to put daylight in the sports hall when I can. And this one hasn't, unfortunately. We did have some windows to the far end, but they got taken out. Value engineering.
Yeah,
so
classic.
Yeah, always happens. But when you say it's a nice to have, to know whether it's dark or light outside, then people go, well, in that case, it's costing me 100 grand. I'm taking it out. But the building's still there, which is good. It's been built, so you've got to sort of pick your battles, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think this one encompasses quite a few of them, to be honest. It's that welcoming environment. It's breaking down the barriers of the participation. So it's not, and I can't say it's a certain design cue or a certain way of doing it, but it's ensuring that you're not just thinking about these as a leisure centre. And you go in leisure centres that have just been built, that have won many awards, and there's a physical barrier at the front door. And I find that just jars against everything that I stand for, if I'm honest. So we try from the off to tell clients not to do that. There are barriers in here, but there's 2 turnstiles just down there into the swimming pool. That's the only place they need any actual physical detection. deterrent for people to go in. There's no access control on the gym, they just trust people, and that's how they do it. It's about that kind of just allowing people to be in an environment and be comfortable in that environment. That's how the community side of it's felt, and I think that's why it's driven the numbers. It's a nice place for people to use. Also, say the location for us, it was manna from heaven. Just kind of, there's a fantastic location on the end of the high street. In the current climate where high streets are dying, the planning guys on the planning consultant have done a review of the Northumberland tourism figures, and they said that the leisure centre has driven in a year £600,000 worth of impact on the high street in a positive way, just because of the amount of people using this facility. So, which is, again, it's great to see that it's actually helping the rest of the high street too. So
that actually ties into a question that I was going to ask about post-occupancy evaluations. Like, do you do that on every project?
Yes.
In quite an in-depth way? Like, do you have like a team that does that?
We have now. We want to do more. We do post-occupancy on it, including things like numbers, etc. We want to break down into the demographics, but a lot of that's just been an iterative process for us on Morpeth. I mean, for one thing, we've realised that it's fantastic to see, you know, and it's fantastic to talk about and make sure everybody understands it and the positivity that can come out of it. But we've realised that we're not doing it as well as we should. And because we do the consultancy at the start, I think it's right to think, well, we need to do better at the end and go back. And we do talk about the circle of the RIBA stages and learning, but the learning just at the moment comes from our own heads as opposed to the client side of it. So we're pushing that post-occupancy. So at the moment, our consultancy guys are writing a post-occupancy survey to send in, and for all the users as well. So
You managed to get them to do it.
Sorry?
You managed to get them to...
We started to get some of it to come back. It is a challenge, but we are going to pick the membership list up from Morpeth, from the gym members, and if you make it for us, I think that's going to have to be quite short and punchy because people will get bored. You know, you need to ask a few key questions just to get a little bit of information back in the first instance, and maybe go back another time. So yeah, we're starting to do that more and more. So,
Just
Go on.
on the idea of trust, I love that, and it seems like an easy thing to implement in an area like Morpeth, which is super affluent. If you take it to somewhere else, I'm not going to name anywhere, but we live there, we can do this slightly. If you were to drop that in where the existing leisure centre is,
yeah,
you're going to have so many...
I'm from Gateshead originally, so it's alright.
You're going to have so many people who will just go in and some people go in for free and utilise the space, I'm sure, but you'll have a lot of people come in and abuse that space. Where's that sort of line for?
Yeah, I mean, we did the one that jumps into my mind. We did a one in Salford. You know, it's in terms of deprivation, it's topping a lot of charts, which is where it doesn't want to be. One of the key things that their existing centre in Salford was that the guys were coming to the barriers I'm talking about and literally shouting and bawling in from the barriers saying, I want to be in my own leisure centre and I don't think I should have to pay for it. That's that stuff that you don't want. So the way we designed Salford, unfortunately, didn't get built, was that we had an area like this that was a public open space. To me, you can only go so far. We can't engineer society, but what we can do is if we do speak to as many people as possible, you can try and bring them on the journey. And if you can speak to some of these people that are slightly sidelined or, you know, not involved in these things, if you can try to bring them on the journey, you at least let them understand that this is an important facility for a lot of people. And all you can do is try to engender that community spirit. And if that's the case, you're always going to get people who, I agree, you know, doing it in Morpeth, it's going to be well looked after. It's an affluent, you know, Northumberland town. But the idea to me is if you can bring as many people along as possible on the journey, you engender that community spirit and want for people to look after their own facility. And that to me is if you just design a facility and went, bam, done. I'm an architect, I've designed you a great facility. People won't treat it well because they're just like, well, it's not really for me. But if you get them on the journey and they might say something and you say, oh, well, I've included that for you. They're like, oh, okay. And then they might, you know, it starts to go out to other people. So that's, we can't design for everybody, but the best thing is to do is speak to as many people as possible and listen to them. Yeah.
So what probably follows on slightly from that, I was going to ask, with my limited understanding of the sport facility managers, not much. I assume you use Sport England for your guidelines.
Yes,
for
yeah.
spaces. Did you end up having any issues with a client of trying to balance? You obviously did a lot of community research. They told you what they want.
Yeah.
Balanced against this is what is necessary for a leisure facility, and did that just go hand in hand? Or?
It just goes hand in hand for our facilities, to be honest. This one wasn't Sport England funded. Sport England ask a lot for very little funding, if I'm honest, from facilities. They put about 1.5 million in, but they ask some of that. They ask for we have a second lift in this, for instance. It sounds a bit churlish, but they ask for a second lift in every facility because the first one might break down. Makes sense. It's £100,000. So out of the 1.5 million, they've already taken 100 grand off you. So there's certain things that they ask, and that's one of the few things that they do. But we know the guidance that well, that we can design in all of the requirements and nice to haves, but also say to the client, but you might not need these things. And that means you've got a slightly better balance around that. But usually we try and design a Sport England guidance, and it works quite well, to be honest. And it usually, Sport England are a group that like to deliver for communities and inclusion. All of their design guidance is decades out of touch. Literally, I think their last Sport England guidance was written early 2000s. So, but we are helping them redesign, like rewrite it, which helps, to be honest. So yeah.
You got really grilled there.
All right, questions.
Excellent. Thanks for your questions.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
It should
So just click.
Yeah, if you click, it'll take you on.
Yeah, sorry, I went a few slides back. Okay. All right. Yeah, thanks for that. That was really interesting. My name's Steve. I'm from a company called Leonard Design Architects, which are based in Nottingham. We don't specialise. We have a lot of different industries and areas that we work in, lots of different sectors. We do a lot of master planning. So if anybody knows Sheffield very well, we did the Heart of the City 2 master plan. We do film studios, we do some limited amount of sports, we do residential, we do offices, we do everything. And today I'm going to be talking about Broadmarsh, which is a big shopping centre, or it was a big shopping centre in the centre of Nottingham that went bankrupt during COVID. So if anybody doesn't know Nottingham very well, it's in the centre of the country. It's about the same size as Newcastle in terms of population. It doesn't feel quite as big. It's got a very small city centre. It is quite deprived. So it's got a very young population. We've got 3 universities actually. We've got a very young population, but there's a lot of joblessness. There's increasing homelessness. You've probably heard of it being referred to as Shottingham in the past. It's not as dangerous as it used to be back in the early 2000s, but it is a relatively deprived area. And with deprivation comes effects on the built environment. You get homelessness, people living outside, living in shop fronts, which deters people away from the city centre, which reduces revenue for shops, and shops and businesses in the city centre have business rates they have to pay. Businesses go under. Places go out of business, they close down, and kind of like it's in a spiral. Places get worse and worse. So I'm going to be talking about Broadmarsh Centre, which is one of 2 major shopping centres. You can see the other one here in Nottingham. It's surrounded by some green spaces. Here I just wanted to highlight the amount of green spaces in Nottingham. And these are some of the other important buildings around. So you'll notice that the main train station is down here. The main market square, the very centre of Nottingham, is here. Broadmarsh shopping centre is right in the middle. The other shopping centre is just off the top, here, Victoria Centre, which is the more upmarket one. That's the one where everybody goes to. That's got the better shops, it's better locations, better layout. Broadmarsh has always been the ugly duckling of the 2. It's never been very appreciated. So, a brief overview of the history of it. It was originally, it's called Broadmarsh because it was once a marsh. They then built a lot of housing on it. It was slums. They knocked them down, improved them. But then in the 70s,
the city planners built a large dual carriageway going right through the city centre called Maid Marian Way and Broadmarsh. And I've read the local planning guide at the time by the local authority, and it's about, 100 pages long. And there are 4 sentences about pedestrians. It was designed for cars. It was never designed for people, and that's why it never worked. So they were both owned by Into, Victoria Centre and Broadmarsh, but Broadmarsh just didn't earn as much money as Victoria Centre. And there were a number of planning applications to improve that, renovate it, and they kept failing, they kept starting and never went through. Eventually, in 2019, they started demolishing the site to renovate it. They were just going to basically build another covered indoor shopping centre on the same site, just more modern. That's all. That was the big idea. And of course, COVID happened, and Into Broadmarsh went into administration, and this massive shopping centre was half demolished, which people need to cross through to get from the train station to the city centre, was just left as a bomb site, basically. But, as I mentioned, the people of Nottingham hated Broadmarsh, we always have, and that was seen as a brilliant opportunity to bring some life back into the city centre. It wasn't seen as a disaster, like, yes, we didn't want another shopping centre in that place, it never would have worked. Leonard Design, for one, have been campaigning for years before that was even built, saying that another shopping centre on that site just isn't going to work because of the way people live these days. You know, people buy online, the high street is dying. Building a big shopping centre where we already have another one in that site isn't going to work, and it didn't, and it went to administration. So this is some photos of how different parts of the Broadmarsh looked over time. So there was a street called Drury Hill. It was an old shopping street, very narrow, very characteristic, very quaint, charming. It was replaced by some escalators when the Broadmarsh was built. This is actually quite a nice view. So this is Middle Hill. The trams run along here now. That church on the corner is actually a pub, and that is the Nottingham Contemporary on the right. You just see how it's changed. It's been cleared of all activity. On the left, just off the side here, is the Broadmarsh. Because it's quite a hilly area. That area is where deliveries come in onto the roof. So on the left-hand side of this photo, there's no activity. On the right, there's a drop down to College, you know very well, where the GT3 offices are. So it's a very inactive street. It's just for cars. Sevens House is a very, very old building that has been lifted and moved nearer to the castle and was replaced with this concrete monstrosity. And that's the other side from the previous photo. So a bit more about the history. As I said, it was all a marsh. You see the outline there. They built a lot of housing. Then they kind of refined that, got rid of some of the slums, built some more major streets, and then it became a massive shopping centre. So the urban grain has gone from very, very open to something a bit more interesting, a bit more granular, lots of housing, to slightly more dense, bigger buildings, to a massive block. It was terrible in 1970. And this is Maid Marian Way here, which runs between the castle and Broadmarsh, and then comes this way, chopping off the train station. So it just really disconnected parts of Nottingham from each other that should be really well connected. So to get from the train station to Broadmarsh, you saw this. This was your welcome into Nottingham, coming from the train station. A brick wall. There's not even any shops on that side. There's no glass. There's no activity. And this, where the construction was happening, was the dual carriageway. So you had to go underneath. You had to go underground to get from one side to the other, or try and cross this busy dual carriageway. And then once construction happened, it became pedestrianised, just because they had to divert the road for construction, and that was your entrance, going through Broadmarsh. That's your welcome to Nottingham. This is how it looked. So when it went into administration, Nottingham City Council started this brilliant initiative, a listening exercise called the Big Conversation. and they made this really great website with loads of information, aerial views, 3D models that you could fly around in, with all the information that I've stolen about Broadmarsh, historical, everything, the sites, the plan, the layout, and basically asked everybody to send in their ideas about what could be done with the Broadmarsh. And what are your ideas? What can you do? Before the building went into administration, the company went into administration, a massive car park was built just here, because previously we had all the roads there, but there was no parking. So a number of, they had a lot of responses. Thousands of people responded. Your everyday person and all the architecture practices of Nottingham, of course, responded, and other organisations. So this is a proposal from Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust, who wanted to turn it back into a marsh, which actually a lot of people were quite interested in, but it's not particularly economically viable, and at night it might not be that safe just to have a city centre park with there wouldn't be as much activity at night, but they wanted to bring wildlife back into the city centre. This was a proposal by a conservation architect, Peter Rogan, who wanted to bring the road network, the paths and the buildings back exactly as they were historically. So they both had their own ideas, very focused ideas. Wildlife Trust wanted to bring wildlife, historical conservation architect wanted to restore history. But we had a different approach. We came in quite late into this. We wanted to find out what the people of Nottingham wanted. So I met up with people from an organisation called Nottingham Co-Housing and Nottingham Good Food Partnership, me and my partner here. And they are non-profit organisations. Nottingham Good Food Partnership aimed at growing food in Nottingham in the city centre rather than out in farms, regenerating that way. Nottingham Co-Housing was an organisation that tried to help with the increasing cost of living and housing by suggesting converting buildings into co-housing. And we met with my local resident group and asked them, what do you want to see in Nottingham? There was about 20, 30 of us, because I lived just next to the Broadmarsh at the time. It was called Narrowmarsh, that area. And we asked them what they wanted, and they gave their ideas, and we went away, and we had just a couple of weeks until the deadline for the big conversation to end. And they were all concerned that even though the council had created this big conversation initiative, that they weren't going to be listened to. They thought, well, the council are just going to do what they want anyway. Nobody wanted the Broadmarsh to be renovated in the first place. Nobody was that bothered about it. Nobody liked it. How are we going to be listened to? So, what we did was we wrote up all of their responses, and we came up with some solutions to solving the problem without just building another shopping centre on site. So, co-working and flexible working obviously came from Nottingham Co-working, that was their idea. Co-housing again. Green investment, greening the city, experience-based retail. So this project had to work for everybody. It had to bring families into the centre. It had to bring jobs in. And a lot of people did say they wanted green space as well. They're inspired by the Wildlife Trust. So these were our 5 principles. And we wanted to rejuvenate the local economy. So there's a lot of worry that Nottingham can be a bit of a commuter town. It's quite easily connected to everywhere. It's connected to London, Birmingham. But we wanted to bring some activity, working, living, everybody moving money around in the city centre. And so we came up with a master plan, and I'll just go through how we did this. So this is the line of a sandstone cliff that runs through Nottingham. And under that cliff are dozens of caves. There's a tourist attraction there called the City of Caves. When the Broadmarsh was built in 1970, they destroyed loads of these caves. There's 800 caves under Nottingham. They're all man-made, but they are all historic. And the people of Nottingham were so appalled by that they got together, they protested, and now all these caves are listed. So we wanted to make more use of that, because the entrance to those caves, that tourist centre, is under that escalator I showed you before, or it was. So some areas had already been approved for demolition, they were being demolished, and we proposed some further demolition. I know the greenest building is the one that already exists, but there were some reasons for demolishing certain parts. So this area here we proposed to demolish because there's a little, at the bottom of the cliff here, there's a little hidden forest. We wanted to expand that. This here, this building running vertically there, is an MCT car park. It's horrible, it's ugly, it's collapsing, and we have the Broadmarsh car park now. It also blocked any views to the castle. The colleges over there were going to be demolished, and that would allow us the opportunity to open up some views towards the castle. We wanted to reforge the connections, much like Peter Rogan Architects wanted as well. The historical connections going from north to south to bring people from the train station into the city centre in a much more pleasant way than currently was. And then we would place our masses of buildings around those paths, framing the edges so that you get the promenade, the view going up to the castle, and views going through the centre into Nottingham city centre. So the place becomes, instead of a barrier, it becomes a wayfinding destination. If you stood there in the middle, you could see, oh, it's that way to the castle, it's that way to the college, it's that way to Market Square, I know where to go. And then we wanted to introduce greenery, same as the other organisations. So there's the castle with a lot of green space there, there's the new college that has some green space, and we wanted to expand the little forest that was hidden at the bottom of the cliff and introduce more green spaces around. So one right in the centre, one leading up to the castle, and one, so this one we proposed as a residential block, so some private green space as well. And improved permeability, as I went through already, so connecting all these green spaces and connecting the city. And then this is where we kept some of the existing building, where we removed it and we created that green heart in the centre. And this is the floor plan showing the retail units, office space on the right, residential on the left, education facility on the bottom. So we're thinking about introducing a sustainable construction academy, which would bring in education, which would also help with jobs. So there's a big lack of there's lots of initiatives for installing solar panels, heat pumps, etc., but there isn't currently the workforce for that. So that was an opportunity we thought we could introduce. The green network, residential on the ground. So I'll quickly flick through uses. So residential on the left, retail on the ground floor, and hospitality. We wanted to create some these streets that were going from left to right. We wanted to make them active retail. People could grow their food on site, sell it in the restaurants. We have a couple of restaurants in Nottingham that do that. In fact, the college here, I built a little community garden here. That's the teaching restaurant on the corner, and they come out and they pick vegetables and ingredients from that garden, and they go and cook it in the restaurant every day. So we wanted to introduce more of that on site. Culture and heritage, so where the caves are, we wanted to make more of that cave attraction, and the historical buildings, so the castle, and reinstate that Drury Hill, the narrow shopping street that's replaced by an escalator. So bring some of that character back into Nottingham. And leisure activities, education, connecting the college to the new sustainable education centre, sustainable construction centre, and then this is all uses. So it's a mix of lots of different uses. We wanted to bring families into the city centre, and students as well. So at the minute there's lots of student accommodation in the city centre. There isn't a lot of dense residential. See here, this area here, this is Narrow-Marsh, this is where I lived, just there. That is the only part, that's the only affordable part of Nottingham city centre that has residential houses with gardens. The inaffordable part is just off the map, it's where the millionaires live. So this is just quickly flicking through the different character spaces. So residential courtyards with green space, framing that internal courtyard. public square right in the centre that allows passage through, active frontage on the ground floor, retail, activities, etc. Heritage streets, as I mentioned, so more independent units, more locally grown and locally made products. Agritech campus, the sustainable construction campus. Slow food street, again, with people, as I worked with Nottingham Good Food Partnership, they had a lot of good ideas about how to grow food on the site, which has already been done at the college, and then served locally at the restaurants, which creates its own little economy. Connection to the caves and the forests, so a lot going on. So this is the presentation that we put together, and we created a Facebook group, and we invited a lot of people from Nottingham. We invited councillors as well, because we wanted to get the voices of Nottingham heard. And we put this presentation together, presented it, and 300 people turned up. I was really surprised. It was all over Teams, because it was during COVID, obviously. People had nothing better to do than watch us present this. And after we presented this wasn't the presentation we did, this is the one that I refined after the presentation. We took even more of their ideas, because everybody that attended that meeting, they sent us their suggestions afterwards, and we incorporated them into these visuals that I produced in the master plan. So this is just the going through all the different elements that I just spoke about earlier, but this is just how I presented it to the public. So the mix of uses, the sustainable food, urban nature, green tourism, shared workspaces, etc. that I went through before. Why we need this. So this is the view looking towards the castle, where the Broadmarsh would have been, with some water space that would be connected to the Sustainable Research College. Reasons why to inhabit the city in a new way, how we could make Nottingham more interesting rather than just building, normal shops, shopping centre. You have more independent sustainability, green-led spaces. This is that little forest that I talked about at the bottom. This is that Sevens house, the big brick building that we retained. So creating a nice, characterful area, renewable energy. This is the main square with the co-housing and the active ground front. So I didn't spend a lot of time designing all this facade. It's basically just something repeated, because I knew that when I was going to present this to the public, they were going to complain about the design. No matter what you design, they're going to say, I don't like that, somebody doesn't like it. But I wanted to get over the idea of the master plan, how it all worked together rather than the design. And so this is connections, because it's quite a hilly site with lots of different levels. This is how it works, connecting underneath and above. So the Contemporary Gallery has an exhibition space on the top level. You can go underneath to the urban garden, to the caves, and access different character areas that I went through before. So this is the master plan that we ended up with after consulting with everybody. I left the main square less green than we'd originally proposed, because we just wanted to have it as a kind of a market square, something more active. We didn't want to take away from the market square, the main market square, old market square in Nottingham. We envisioned this as having a different purpose. So the one in the city centre, in the very centre, is all for big activities, events. They put the Christmas market on there. They have performances, stages. We were thinking this is more for sustainability. So people that are growing food on site, fresh food markets, local produce, that kind of thing. Or we have an event every year in Nottingham called Green Hustle that promotes sustainable events. And we thought this could be a good place for it. Then we added on this allotment here, because there's a historic allotment called St Anne's allotment that's oversubscribed in Nottingham. People want more space because Nottingham's quite it's not got that much greenery in the centre, so we wanted to introduce some more and take away some of the overflow from St Anne's allotments and put that next to the castle and make the Maid Marian Way a bit more friendly. So it used to run along here, came around there, that was the border of Broadmarsh, and now that we're proposing that as a pedestrian space And here are some images just to give people an idea of the different activities that would happen. So another idea that people liked was, what about building like an Eden project in Nottingham? This came from the public. We thought, okay, we don't have space at the minute for that, but if further buildings are going to be demolished or repurposed, you could have that there. Green offices, so Grade A office space is required in Nottingham, it's in demand. So we wanted to be commercially viable as well as, trying to be imaginative. So, Nottingham City Council created a steering group who would decide which projects they wanted to go ahead with. So they invited a handful of people from the thousands to present, and we were one of the groups that were asked to present. So we had to prove that it was going to be economically viable, so we showed the areas of space that could be rented and presented to them. And so did a number of other architects. I don't know if GT3 did actually, might have done.
I think we did some sketches around it, but we didn't actually go for the full thing.
Yeah, so quite a few, let's say, 10 or so architects were invited to present to the steering group. And then, after they'd gathered all the information, they decided to appoint, after thousands of people from Nottingham, all the Nottingham architecture practices sent in their ideas, they decided to appoint Thomas Heatherwick to lead the vision, who's of course a London-based architect. So there he is, standing at the end of my street in front of the ruins of Broadmarsh. And to his credit, he was really interested in the project. I mean, I wouldn't have turned it down if I was from London. I would have said yes, but he came up to Nottingham and he wanted to meet me, and I was just a Part 2 assistant at the time, living in a flat built into the cliff. So I thought, oh my God, this architect wants to meet a cave-dwelling architectural assistant to talk about this project. So he came to Nottingham. He met me. He met a guy called Marcellus Baz, who runs a charity called Switch Up, that gets kids off the street, out of knife crime, out of gangs, and gets them into sport, into boxing. And we had a really good discussion. He was really interested, and he listened to everything we had to say. And then he went and created his vision. You might notice some similarities. So we've got the green heart in the centre, reconnecting the spaces, got the water feature over there, pedestrianised the Collins Street. So he did listen, which is really good, obviously. I mean, it's the best you could ask for, I think. And then that was handed over to BDP afterwards. These are his images. This is Heatherwick's images, concept images of what it could look like. So there's the caves I talked about. This is the ruins of the old Broadmarsh, so he wanted to keep the structure. So, whereas I proposed to keep some of the structure, but he'd gone a step further where he'd gut out all of the building and just leave the literal structure, the columns, the beams, and make something more playful out of that. So you see that here. You see there's a boxing arena, after speaking to Marcellus Baz, the boxer, and creating a really interesting space, growing food on site. So he did listen. And yeah, so this is how it looks now. BDP have taken over delivering it. This is only part of it. You see the hoarding around some of the buildings in the background there that they've covered in some nice art. They've got some water feature, they've got some play spaces, greenery, trees. So this is called the Green Heart now in Nottingham. It's the part that passes up from the bottom through to Market Square. So you can, I think you agree, that's much better than the brick wall that was presenting to people as they arrived before. But this is only the start. This is only the first part. But even though we didn't get any money or any credit for this, we helped the people of Nottingham get their voices heard. That's what they were really worried about, and build this. And even though there's always some people who always say, "Oh, what's the point? What are you building this for? It's going to get ruined. It's going to get graffitied." And as you mentioned, if people have a sense of ownership of the place, if they've had some involvement, it doesn't happen. That space has been there since summer now, and it's still beautiful. It's not been vandalised. There's no rubbish. People take care of it. People always use it. People love it, and yeah, I hope it continues to improve in that way. So you can get your voice heard, even if you don't have to be a star architect. You just have to get one of them to listen to you. Okay. Yeah. Any questions? Yep.
How much time did you sink into it, given that it was all pro bono work?
2 weekends.
Is that all?
Yeah.
Oh,
2 very, very difficult weekends.
And then how did you start reaching out to people to actually start bringing a force together? Because I know if, say, I just rocked up to the council tomorrow and said, this is a scheme, probably just going to get...
So I started, right, I'll go back to a plan. So when I started, as I mentioned, I was living in a cave. Not really a cave. So there's a cliff running along here. I was living just here. And this college was being built. And this used to be all green space, all along here. And all of that was green space. And I was a bit concerned that there was going to be no green space left for the residents, because there are lots of kids living in those streets. It's a very cheap, quite deprived area. It's not deprived. It's all right. It's nice. It's a working class area. I wouldn't say it's deprived. But there was going to be no green space left after that was built. But I noticed an artist who worked at the gallery noticed that there was this little corner here where the architect that was designing it had proposed just to put the substations during construction, and there was no consideration given to what was going to happen after those substations were removed, because they're only temporary. So I petitioned the council for ages. Let's build a community garden there. I was sending them letters, I was calling them, and I went and did a survey of all my neighbours, and I sent this information off to the council, and they relented eventually. They said, yeah, we'll build you a little community garden, we'll put a fence around it, we'll give you some paths and some benches. But as part of that, I got in touch with Penny from Nottingham Good Food Partnership, because I didn't really know much about community gardens at the time. I said, could we grow some food here? Could you give me some advice? And she came and she met me, and we had a talk, went away, and we're carrying on doing that. And then when this Broadmarsh thing happened, I thought, all right, great. I know Broadmarsh really well. I live right there. I know a little bit about master planning from working at Land Design. I think I could do something really good here. I contacted Penny. Penny contacted Nottingham Co-Housing, and we organised with my residents group. We had a little WhatsApp group and said, look, we're going to respond to this big conversation. Do you all want to have your say? There was only 20 people there. They had their say. We did our first initial ideas, and then Penny happened to she used to work for the BBC. She had a lot of political contacts, media contacts, and so did Nottingham Co-Housing. So we created this Facebook group and invited thousands of people. And out of those initial 1,000 people, we posted on our Facebook groups called Nottingham Green Quarter, if you want to look it up. We posted that we were going to show a master plan, an idea, a proposal for Broadmarsh, and we want all your ideas, and we want to help you get your voices heard. And we also invited all the councillors to the group. So we invited the local MPs, the local councillors, the people that I'd been hassling to make that little community garden, and they joined. And so when the councillors joined, and they saw there were 300 residents giving their input into this one plan, and there was some local reporters there. They contacted the BBC. BBC called me. I did a little interview online, and it went online. I mean, I'm not the only project that got on the news. The other two that I showed, the Wildlife Trust, quite a few others did as well. But I noticed that ours had a really good reception. So some of the other ideas could be quite outlandish. The historical one got a lot of positive comments on the articles. The Wildlife Trust was a little bit mixed between, yes, we want lots of greenery, no, it's going to become a space for crime. There were some other architecture practices that did things that were either completely off the wall or not very interesting, and they got a lot of bad comments. But ours got mainly, say, 80% positive comments because we'd involved the community. And I think they kind of made the council think, all right, we can't ignore this one. Let's invite them. And yeah, when Heatherwick only came to meet 6 groups, I think, and we were one of them. We were just some Part 2 assistants and some residents. So yeah, quite a victory, I think.
Do you know how it's being funded now?
How it's been funded? So they applied for Levelling Up Fund, I think 3 years in a row under the previous government, and didn't get anything. There was already funding in place for the demolition. I'm not sure, because since Heatherwick launched it, I haven't really been in the loop. I haven't been kept in touch. I don't know if you...
The look of a town deal. I think they might have gone.
Maybe.
Yeah.
There was always money for partial demolition. So on the diagram that I showed, where there's the proposed demolition, that was already there. And then Nottingham City Council actually had to file for bankruptcy. So I'm not sure actually where it's. I don't know. No idea. That's why it's taking so long as well.
It just looks nice. It looks nice what they've done.
It does. It's really nice. I was really surprised actually when that they did it, because I thought, oh, this isn't going to happen for years. They're never going to get funding. Just go to the end. And so the part that they've opened is just. So it's coming up from Carrington Street here. It's just a little portion here. So the rest isn't built. It's only a tiny bit. So it's just enough to keep people flowing through the site. It's hoarding either side. The rest is still under construction. But they've opened up just enough to give you an idea of, oh wow, this is going to be great once it's done. And it is. It's really nice. You go. I work just around the corner on the canal. When I walk through that on my lunch break, there's always people sitting there having their lunch, enjoying the weather when the weather's good. And a nice environment.
The new library, the library inside of the transportation hub is in very high quality.
Yeah, that's a London design project as well. Yeah, that library on the corner, that's really interesting actually. Well, you're talking about the modern libraries having loud space. When I first went in there was a band playing right in the entrance, and there's people reading in the same space. Yeah, no, it's a nice building. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I have a question. So when I was living in Nottingham for 6 years for my part 2 and for my PhD, and lots of memory coming like that too from those years. When I search Bromarsh Center, I think we still got a visual of those Heatherwick's image.
Sorry, when you...
Bromarsh regeneration, we still have a Heatherwick's visual like a modern road and almost like a forest takeover of those
Yeah, it's true. When you look up Broadmarsh now, it's still all Heatherwick's images. I took this photo myself, and these other two are from the Facebook group. So I don't know why it's not being reported on that it's being built.
So that will not happen anymore, right?
What?
Heatherwick scheme.
Well, Heatherwick scheme has been developed further. I mean, Heatherwick scheme was just a vision, so it's just an initial concept.
Yeah.
BDP have progressed that. That's my plan, sorry. So BDP have developed it more, made it more realistic.
Okay.
So, Heatherwick scheme is being developed, but in a more realistic fashion by BDP. So you might not get all of the crazy stuff, because the structure, for example, he put these images. You see, though, they look really thick. But then you look at the photo, look how thin those columns are. it couldn't really support all of those activities that you wanted.
So are there any plans for that structure to be reused?
I think so. I mean, that hasn't been touched. That's just been left. I think it's an idea for the future. They still want to do that, but they don't
You
know
walk
exactly
past
how.
that on the way up from the train station, don't you? It's still
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you still see that. Yeah. So yeah, there are plans, but I think it's a long, long time in the future. It's not going to be
Probably
realised for
PRS
10,
apartments
20
or
years. Yeah, sorry?
Probably become PRS apartments, probably.
Yeah. True. Wouldn't be a bad place for them.
No.
I think the Elgin Square is another part. You've got the part of Elgin Square is
Yeah.
really struggling. Another part is struggling that. I think that's an interesting place to show to see about that part.
That's a good question. It could be to both of you, actually, what you know. And how do you keep kind of community engagement going when projects take so long and kind of there's all the reality of it and the kind of ups and downs with it? How do you kind of keep the community
Do you want to answer that
inside?
one?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was literally just trying to get meetings back in the diary and touching base with. So whenever we took any community engagement, stakeholder engagement pieces, we would distill that into a document and send it back to those guys and ask them if that is what you said. Because what you don't want to do is, again, take it away and just go, I think you said this, I'll design whatever I want. But it's more that sort of send it back to them. We do that with everything that we do in terms of vision workshops, etc. Send it back and go, is this how you understand that? And then try and touch base back with them. So community is slightly more difficult when it's just the wider community, because you're not going to take people's addresses. That's not going to work. But it may be things like the library guys or one of the adult learning group. Just go back and speak to them essentially, and just make sure that we've designed this at every stage. Essentially, you can't constantly do it, unfortunately. Time doesn't allow, and programs don't allow, and cost doesn't allow generally. But it's that kind of, as long as you try to interact, and then when you go to something like a planning consultation, for instance, and you've engaged with all of these people, they can understand where you've potentially thought of that, like incorporated their ideas, and you remember them as well. If you keep the team on as well. So we had a good team on Morpeth, for instance, and we had all the same guys going to the same things. You remember faces. Certain people will stand out. You probably had the same. You get certain voices, and that's the way it is. But you've got to listen to everybody. But certain people always come, oh yeah, I can see you've done this, and I can see you've done that. So yeah, it's just about trying to factor in those opportunities as you move forward, really.
And that's one of the benefits of the post-occupancy evaluation as well. After you've built it, then you get the feedback of what you did right, what you did wrong. Did you listen to them well, and what can you learn for the next time?
I just think especially for like say yours, it must be hard to keep people on side and motivated.
Yeah, but I'm not involved with it anymore. So yeah, I don't know if they are doing any. I mean, they haven't contacted me, and I was very active back at the start of this. Since Heatherwick launched his vision, I haven't heard anything. So who knows what's happening now? But they are, they have started to build some that we suggested. We'll just have to see how it goes in future.
A question for probably both of you again is, what have you found the most successful type of community engagement is? Because I know it sounds like you spoke to people, went out to different groups. Is it an activity where you're getting people to jot down their ideas, or is it literally open forum, just say what is the most successful, you think?
It depends on the project. So for this one, it was a completely open forum because it was essentially creating a blank slate, getting rid of the Broadmarsh. What do you do? And that's what the city council had done with the big conversation. They didn't know what to do, so they just said, everybody send your ideas in. And
We want lots of free ideas.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do the research phase for free. And that's what we did when we met the local residents. Initially, it was just get your ideas. But then on other projects I've worked on, where you have a client that knows what they want to do. So, for example, I'm going to be working soon on some public space and community gardens. but they want to get the community involved in designing them. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold a workshop where we print out a plan of the space, and we've got some little 3D models and taking some pens and having an interactive workshop that way. So yeah, it depends on the project.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. I mean, it's again, with a client who knows what they want, say on a leisure centre facility, you can't just open the floodgates on, no, I want climbing walls, I want bowling alleys. Everybody wants a 50-metre pool, everybody wants an ice rink, and you can't do that on the site that we had in Morpeth. So essentially, the way we find the most successful engagement and getting the right response back, and that doesn't mean that we're trying to corral people too much, but it's to do some shorter and smaller engagement with some of the key stakeholders to come out with some key themes and key ideas. And it's the aims and aspirations of the project. And then if you present that to the community, who in most instances are lay people in terms of design, they've got something to bounce off. So it's not, because if you give them a big blank bit of paper, say if you didn't do the garden and didn't, you know, it can short circuit some people because, you know, learning design is a skill and it takes a long time to do it. So if you give them something to bounce off, that's what we find is probably the best thing to do. In most kind of open community pieces, we give them, ask them key questions about, you know, do you think we should have daylight in the sports hall, or do you know, these kind of questions where it can start to inform the design and help the design in that way maybe. But also the ones where we've done some great ones with kids where you just go, what do you want? And they do, you know, bowling alley on a cloud. It's kind of a, you know, it's a whatever. I haven't got the brain to say the stuff that these guys come up with because it's fantastic. But that sort of stuff frees you up. It just allows you to think a little bit differently. Oh yeah, that'd be great. How can we incorporate that? You know. So yeah, it is definitely thinking about the different groups that you're speaking to and how you can do it.
Yeah. The other side of the coin is sometimes you might want to steer the conversation slightly away from topics that are just not relevant. So there's always somebody that turns up at an engagement session that has their own little bugbear that has absolutely nothing to do with your project. They'll complain about the parking on their street or potholes somewhere else. It's nothing to do with what I'm talking about. I can't. It's not in my area. It's not in my site. You have to. It's not. You know, that's an example. And as I mentioned, I didn't want everybody talking about the design of the facades on this project because it's not about the facades, it's about the uses, it's about the master plan. The facades, you know, the design comes later. So I did very generic repeating pattern on all of the buildings so I didn't get too many people saying, oh, I want to see brick, I want to see... I mean, you can have brick, you can do that later, but it's not for this stage of design. So you have to, without telling people what they want, you have to steer them in the right areas of conversation. So you pose certain questions. You don't leave it completely open. Like if I just said, what do you want to see here in Nottingham? They might say, yeah, I want to see more brick facades. I mean, it's interesting, but for this, you know, this stage of development, it's not quite relevant. We want to know what uses. So you ask them, what uses do you want to see? What do you want to see people doing in the city centre? You don't say, what do you want your buildings to look like? You do that maybe later at a session that's more relevant. So yeah, learn to phrase your questions.
Thank you very much, both. That was really, really informative and very interesting. Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Greg.